Actually,
I sure do.
Thank you, Patrick.
Are there any announcements to begin with?
So this is Frank Neapold over at NOAA. One quick announcement is we are 3/4 of the way through the ACE National Dialogues. We have our final dialogue on Thursday this week at 1 o'clock. If you aren't tracking that, I'll put the URL in the chat for those who are not tracking what we're talking about, and also for the record. And I can report to you that this community-driven unofficial process is robust, significant, diverse, and important. And what I can also say, and any perspectives of those who've participated so far would be welcome, is that taking a very different approach in this round of climate change education, or in the wider field, is operating, what should be, and then how do we get there, as opposed to here's what is, let's hope it all adds up, which is really what happened in 2009. And it turns out we've changed, our thinking has evolved in really important ways, and the answers are unique and important. That's what I'm seeing so far. So, anyway, that just, that's a long announcement, but also report out. So we still have more ways to go, but turns out what we all committed to in one way or another has started yielding very important contributions. So I'm really happy that Clean played an initiation role in making this all happen. So great deal of gratitude here. Anybody?
Following on with something a little less big, but a little urgent in time. You and I had a quick email exchange this morning coming out of the session from the upcoming AMS annual meeting that's relevant to the Clean Network. I've just put the link and info in the chat. I'm sorry, I did bring up on a previous call or two that the abstract deadline was coming, but I don't maintain detailed session by session awareness of the conference. And so I'm really glad that this one was called out to the Clean Network as a relevant session to share our work. There's a session entitled Urgency and Hope, K-12 Education in a World of Climate Change. And I put the link to that. The current deadline is the 24th of August with a small possibility it will be extended by a week. The meeting will be 100% virtual. In terms of sessions and presentations, so there aren't travel barriers to participation. And I know that the session organizers across the board in the education conference and all of the sessions are still eagerly accepting abstracts here before the end of the month.
Wendy, two quick questions. Do you know what the virtual conference attendance registration fee is approximately?
It has not been announced yet because they're scrambling to figure out what the costs will be for implementing it too. The goal is about half of normal.
Which is?
It's usually in the mid 500s, I think.
It's about 250.
Yeah, it could be 3.25. But it's going to be a lot lower than usual.
Okay. All right.
But not announced yet because scrambled, COVID.
And then I guess the registration, the abstract submission fee, do you know what that is approximately?
My brain is thinking it's $90, but because I'm staff and I submitted my abstract yesterday, I didn't have to pay it because I'm staff. So I think it's 90. I'm sure that can be figured out pretty quick. I can investigate that one.
It's okay. Just ballparks are all that's all I need.
In that range. Sorry. Didn't come from
no, that fuzzy, it works.
Good.
so can I ask a couple of follow-up questions?
Sure. I may not be the one to answer them, but ask away.
Yeah. So I'm interested in this space and actually many spaces with scientists because twice this year I've written papers in collaboration with scientists around sort of educational justice, mainly related to climate justice. One with Rebecca Hacker related to chemistry. It was a request we had for articles for the Chemistry World in the UK. And then another one we just submitted last week with Heidi Spelzer for ecological applications. And again, it was a request to respond on a response article. And the requests are very similar, and I've been thinking about this more broadly. So is this kind of idea something that fits into this realm? It's basically the idea of multiple perspectives and practices of science in different cultural spaces mean that science and scientific literacy are different things to some degree, depending on where you are in the world, and that we get cultural conflict sometimes when we structure education systems to only have a singular vision of science. And so like something around that, like how do we complicate that in our educational structures?
I think there would be tremendous interest in that conference, in the education conference. And I don't know if there is a session that jumps out at you as the best one. I don't know if this is it or others.
I think this is the right spot because all of the work I've been doing is on climate change specifically. So yeah.
And the session chairs coordinate and move abstracts between two. And so, I mean, yes, but just seeing the trend in the conversations that have been happening in the education conference, I think tremendous interest in that.
Okay. And do you know how long the presentations are or the shares are?
Well, typically the most common format is a 15-minute with 3 for question format, but I don't know that that's what will happen in a space. I think there are going to be different kinds of ways. I think there'll be oral posters with 5 minutes and a short type briefing. So it's all to be figured out in the coming months what the format is. And I think a huge part of that is also the number of abstracts that get submitted. Because the virtual space allows so many different. When the meeting is held in person, they try to keep as many of the concurrent conferences synchronous as possible because people jump sessions. And so they try to run most of them in that 15-minute format so people can bounce.
Right.
All bets are off in a virtual implementation. I know the education conference likes to experiment. They have a sharing session for hands-on activities. I think they're talking about a panel. So I would say tell your story in the abstract and then be a part of the ride this fall as we figure out how those messages will be shared.
Okay, that's terrific. Thank you.
Absolutely. Hi, Katie. Saw you pop in.
Hey everyone. I assume you're talking about AMS, Wendy?
We are. I threw a big chat in there with the link, especially to the climate relevant session that's still accepting abstracts.
Oh, do you mind just posting that link in there again real quick?
Oh.
Or was that the one that Missy sent out earlier too to the Clean Network? Cool. I was thinking of that one, so thank you. I just wasn't sure if there was another.
Nope. In fact, I copied it right from there because she said it so well.
So Katie, I'm wondering if we shouldn't push this over to all the people who are leading AGU sessions, because there's a strong resonance between this and that. So I don't know if there's a way to communicate with at least the chairs and the conveners to make sure.
I mean, yeah, I can forward this straight to the chairs and conveners that we had for AGU. I know they're all on the Clean Network as well, so I should have gotten it, but I can forward it to them specifically and sort of put a little note in the front that says, AGU conveners may want to consider this other conference with similar relevance or something like that. So yeah.
Sure.
I think that would be great.
I had a question related to AGU, Katie, now that you're online too. I know that we got an email last week, I think it was, just that we're good to sort of create our panels and do whatever. Do we need to go in as conveners and have a meeting just to look over what's been submitted in each of the sections? Or does it automatically just accept everyone into it?
Yeah, so I think the email that we got from the AGU system said something around, at least all I've gotten from the AGU system was like, check that there aren't any abstracts in here that don't belong, and you were supposed to let them know by a while back on that one. And then recently I reached out to Sandlin Buxner about our climate literacy sessions, and she let me know that well, we had, the one, I think the one that you're convening with me, Deb, is the one that we usually try to keep is, we wanted to keep it as like, in this case, I think they're doing the poster sessions as like e-lightning or whatever, and that's what we wanted also. So, so we're keeping that one as just that level. And then the other sessions, there was, she didn't actually tell me how many the youth group got, but I think they must have been enough, because she let me know that the higher ed and workforce folks didn't have enough abstracts for an oral session. And so now was sort of the timing we were supposed to be the last week or so trying to merge if we needed to. So I reached out to the conveners of that session, and honestly, two of them are on here today, but I only heard back from one person and got kind of late. And then, I don't know, there's some communication that might be happening to try to reach out to Sandlin to see if we can still get them merged today. So actually 3 of them are on here. If you're all on board with that, I know that Bonnie was interested in trying to reach out to Sandlin about it to merge. So you're all cool with that. So I'll just respond to Bonnie and let her know that I hope she still reached out to Sandlin, because I know she wanted to
yeah,
yesterday.
she did.
So.
She just sent an email
Okay, great.
to Stan. Yep.
At some point, a question for Wendy, looking at the AMS, but I don't want to interrupt the flow, but just not to let the AMS totally die on the subject either.
Totally, thanks, Jim. I agree, let's come back to the AMS, but just to finish my thought on AGU. So I think we're kind of, other than that one session, I think we were all pretty well okay in terms of right now just figuring out who is what session. And then the next step, Deb, is trying to figure out the sort of schedule in terms of order of speakers and whether you build in discussion time or anything like that. I assume that they will reach out about that, because I haven't heard anything about doing that yet. So that, I think that will come next. Today or yesterday was the date they were trying to get the sessions merged, and then the next step is usually the figuring out of the schedules.
Okay.
Yeah, I ended up sending an email to AGU clarifying they see this as 2 steps. And usually for other conferences, it's all 1 step. So yeah, so the next step is you will have access to all the abstracts. Right now you have just the titles. So I was able to get a spreadsheet of all the titles or submissions to my session, but not the details of the abstracts.
Cool. Yeah, so I think is that all we need to talk about on AGU stuff then? Let's come back to AMS, Jim, and your question maybe.
Just
Great, thank you. And no, Frank, go ahead.
Well, just one last AGU element. Katie, do you know, given virtual, are they still talking about the virtual workshop? Is that still in the mix?
That I think so. I mean, we had submitted that, and I haven't heard anything that it's not happening anymore. And Anna's been the one in the most contact with them, so we should double check with her. But she would have told me if anything came up that they were canceling that on us. So I assume we're still having some amount of a workshop time. How exactly that's working and where and all of that, I don't know, but I haven't heard anything different. So I'm assuming it's still happening in some way virtually.
Yep. Okay, that's fine. Sorry, Jim.
Thanks, Frank. So Wendy, on looking at the MS seeing it being pretty receptive to students. I mean, I'm looking at the abstract title. It says, "Do you want students?" and so on. So a couple of things. As you know, with a lot when we work with students, it is with groups of students, like Climate Club at Lowell. So there's a thing of how well does it work to have a number of students do an abstract. I mean, I'm sorry, I have to do my homework on AMS this year and or coming up here about fees and how that all works. I mean, I can do my homework, but I thought I'd pose that question to you too, of what we know about, like if a abstract is submitted by a group of students, maybe under one person's name, we've never tried to not work with the format, right? If the format says one student, that's the way it goes. But in the reality, it's letting it know this is going to be a group of students wanting to give a presentation. I also, looking at also how the things are written in your link, the link that you go to. This is very receptive. It's very, the subject matter is just perfect. It really is a good place for students and adults to participate. So that works. But just kind of throwing that in. Do we know student fees or things like that?
I don't know what's happening with student registrations specifically, but as far as the abstract goes, I have seen co-presentations by as many as 4, 5, 6 students at once giving talks in the education conference. And of course, because it's an education conference, everyone is full attention at the students' presentations. They love it. So it can be done. I have not been a part of one of those papers. I don't know if they typically maybe have a degreed professional, member or engaged professional that's handling the abstract fee as the lead author and the AMS member, and then all the students are co-authors, and the lead author seeds the presentation to the students. I would suspect it may have been handled that way just because of abstract fees and that sort of thing. And I'm afraid I would need to, you need to be in touch with the meetings department about special registrations for students. I have no idea what that would mean in a virtual space. So, but getting the abstract in with multiple students on it is a non-issue. I think the only limitation is whatever the number of authors limit is.
Yes. No, thank you. So, that we'll work with the way the format is, and it sounds like once the abstract ends, then there's time to work out. The registration thing tends to come a little bit later.
Yes.
That works with things. So please, if that helps in your work with AMS and everything, I'd be encouraging the students to be supportive. It's not to come in and just show off what they do, but support the entire effort, right? To be a contribution.
To engage, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, right. But if that specifically helps how you're working with an AMS, please know that we're listening. Okay. Thanks. One, by the way, of again, please, if we have other things that, in the question, maybe sort of stay in the announcement category. Others may have been seeing this too. Something we've been expecting is in September, what will be the actions that take place? I mean, historically, September is the month of climate action. 350.org and its predecessors have been doing that since early 2000s. I mean, it was well before 350.org. September was always when there were marches and other things going on, and now it's virtual. So sure enough, Fridays for the Future has announced September 25th as being Climate Action Day. So we can count on that. I mean, that's the Greta's people and the climate strike people. So that's where that is. Others, I'm seeing others coming in and looking in during that week of climate action. So from, 17th to 27th, we can anticipate a lot coming. The announcements are just coming out now. What form they take, there are clearly some that are looking to have marches and have physical manifestations. But we can expect a lot going on this year. And I can say that we learned, at least I think most of us collectively, we didn't find it very difficult to work within that realm, even though it was a climate strike. It was not, there was plenty of room for educators and schools. This was not saying, Amy, I see you're on the call, San Francisco Unified School District, you're terrible. We don't want education. There's the strike element, but there's plenty of room for no, we're education, and we want to do that. So I certainly didn't find that hard in the Bay Area.
Yeah, Jim, it'll be really interesting to see, I think, sorry, going back to kind of what you're talking about with the conferences and students, I think it'll be interesting to see this year how students are incorporated into these conferences. Because I think like AGU in the past has done a pretty good job of trying to, get local schools and teachers to get their students to participate and do poster sessions and things like that. And I'm just curious, how that might work in a virtual session. It's like in some regards, you could potentially engage more with folks, like, go beyond sort of the local area than you could before. But then at the same time, like, I think we're all struggling with kind of so much going on, and how do you sort of reach people and get them involved, and teachers and students are sort of struggling with schools right now. Are they going to be focused on something like a conference? Anyways, it's just all these balancing aspects. I think will be interesting to see whether it's sort of a stronger or a less strong student presence this year in the virtual conferences.
And running with that, Katie, something that we're looking to get a better handle on in the next couple of months is, out of last September, a lot of the organizations that happened out of the climate strike were the formations of climate clubs. So that term became there's quite a lot of climate clubs if you look on the internet and around. Now, where it used to be green teams or environmental teams, or maybe some other terms, those still exist, but climate club was a new category, and to seeing if that's still alive. And I mean, that can be a way to, I'm just identifying a way that we can look for those organizations and encourage. One thing I think Mobile Climate Science Labs wants to do is encourage those clubs to see that they can be recognized in the academic world and they can be taken seriously. And don't let that fizzle what you're doing. We can give you support, we can give you recognition, and do that. So that's one place we're looking to see how that may come out, is that groups of students be found and say, well, go to the AMS, take part of the AMS conference, the AGU. We didn't. One more is, sorry, on AGU, as I think you were alluding to, AGU also has a section, education, where students give posters, and they're sort of in scientists and training is sort of the idea, recognition. That's a substantial section. They might be up to 100, and even they have climate related. They have solution kind of work, especially the folks in Hong Kong. But that's a connection I think maybe we can advance through AGU on this too. That's something maybe we could talk sometime. Katie, is there ways to have the sections that you're organizing and that organizing, that you're benefiting from that? That those are folks. Is that of Stanford that they organize that? But I mean, if there's any interest in that, that's something we're looking to help to bridge, if that helps.
James, who in Stanford has been organizing that? Do you know?
I'm sorry, it's not in front of me. How about I get that in the chat in a few minutes?
Yeah, that would be great. I'm just curious because I know there's a couple different clusters of folks at Stanford, and I really want to connect with them because there's a longer story there, but it would be great to be able to reach out to them.
Agreed. Lots of different in Stanford. I think there's some overlap though, so I'll get that out in just a sec.
Okay.
Jim, one thing to track, given the date you're talking about, which is the 25th, that's happening during Climate Week, which is usually that week in New York. Obviously, this is going to be a virtual Climate Week. I can't imagine there's going to be face-to-face, but inside the structure, I put in the chat window, the 10 themes. One of them is youth, public mobilization, and justice. And there are already 19 events registered inside this space. So I would think, that would be a place to consider whatever work is going on, consider registering it given the virtual space, assuming that there's no cost structure for registering events.
Frank, can you, if it's okay if we sort of move to Climate Week for a second?
Sure.
I have some questions about what is and I'm trying to say this so it doesn't sound negative because it's not meant to, but what is the point of Climate Week in terms, is it just public awareness raising, or
No.
what is it?
So think of it this way, is that at the international policy level on climate, there's a series of events that kind of rotate around a year that are always happening. Mm-hmm. So COP process in November, December is one of them. The SB meetings in June in Bonn, Germany is another one of them, right? So then there are things that happen between them. So now September is 3 months later after the SB 50, whatever. And then that happens in New York. And then that goes a couple of weeks later to, months later to the COP process. And then there's these other things that happen in between. So there's an agenda. So if you look at the UNFCCC process, there is an annual kind of ratcheting structure where meetings come together and people negotiate and expand and negotiate and expand and focus. And, and so the Climate Week is one of those places, because if I remember, a Climate Week is happening relative to the general session of the UN or something like that. So there's a reason why Climate Week is in September in New York City. And it relates, if I remember right, it relates to the UN General Assembly. So these are, I mean, my family works in this space. And so they go in this annual cycle where they're, with everyone else is cycling around the planet, trying to figure out how do we make progress on climate. Bottom line though, is the stuff we talk about in CLEAN, which is mostly a domestic network related to this, they forget about us. And they're doing it at their peril. Everything they want to do, if they don't have a robust strategy for how education, training, public access, public participation, public awareness, and collaboration work, all their goals fall apart because they're trying to do policy and finance without the people. And they're starting to get humbled. And so the fact that they have a youth public mobilization and justice theme, now it's the 8th theme, that says something right there. But still, the fact that it's a theme is starting to show that they're getting humbled in their realization that you can't change everything without permission and support from people, except for if you're in a totalitarian regime. Then you can do it. But that's not the dominant government structure in the world. Sorry, that was a big diatribe there, but I think you take my point.
No, I appreciate that. I've always wondered about these events that happen at a specific time, and I'd never been able to see the big picture of it or how it's interconnected. So I appreciated that 101 lesson there.
So one other important, I mean, there's like all these big players. So like the Davos meetings have a piece of this, and the G7 has a piece of this, and the G19 or 20, and so then the World Bank has their annual meetings, and then there's all these things that they kind of try and thread across all of these events so that it can move an agenda. And so one thing launches and builds to the next thing, and then builds in the next thing, and so on. So there's some responsiveness, but anyway, that gives you some sense of it. Hopefully that doesn't confuse you. I'll add the link to the UNFCCC calendar. That's on the UNFCCC. It's not the greatest tool, but it gives you just a sense of this agenda moving across time. And we are part of that process in as much as we want to be.
Okay, thanks Jim too for the link. The Jennifer Saltzman at Stanford, I have actually met her and talked to her at some point about the Bright Stars program. I remember now, it was at AGU somewhere along the way. But great work. Okay. All right, where are we at?
Frank, how did the other dialogues go? Just wondering, because I didn't get a chance to attend others. So what was, just give us a little.
Well, it wasn't the same without you, Devarti. It just wasn't the same. Just playing. Look, I mean, each of them is robust. The dialogues are substantial. The perspectives are coming together, and so we've completed 3. We're in the middle of the process of synthesizing the 3rd dialogue. I think that the transformational learning and engagement one was really significant, but the community participation and decision making, I also thought was really significant. One thing that I'd say top line, and Deb and others might want to have more. And others who've been participating in these. I see Wendy and others. I mean, actually quite a few people have been participating in one way or the other. Is the workforce one is the area where we have the most work to do. It's the area where it shows, especially in the context of COVID, that creating jobs is going to have to be a really important priority for the next few years, without any doubt. How do we create those jobs while solving climate change simultaneously is a really important trick. And what I took away from the climate ready workforce dialogue is we are not of one mind here, and there's so much more development that has to be done. I'll give you just a personal anecdote, and I'll be super quick. My middle son probably wants to get into the renewable energy workforce. He's 17. I've been trying to find a community college certification program for offshore wind technicians on the construction side for months. I consider myself to be a very savvy internet searcher, and it is incredibly hard. I finally found Bristol Community College has a program for 2 semesters. You can get certified to work on offshore wind technology, right? The fact that I had to look that hard for that long and find so little is telling that this area is ripe for massive support. And we've known this in the Clean Network for a couple of years, but knowing it and doing something about it aren't the same thing. So I'm just sorry, I'm belaboring that point, but I'm feeling like our community really needs to find a way to support and focus on the job side of this equation, because this is where a lot of the focus is going to be from, the pandemic economic devastation that's just starting to realize. So sorry, but I mean, I'm really excited about the one on Thursday, but I think that the coordination is also probably going to be a little bit of a wonkier conversation. So if you're interested in coordination and collaboration structures, Thursday would be a great time to show up.
No, I ask because so we started our hybrid structure. We opened our semester this week, and my class is climate literacy, and one of the questions, I'm meeting students because we are asynchronous this week, so I'm meeting them one-on-one, and I was curious, so I asked them, what do you want to see out of this course? And the 2 answers that I'm hearing in a class of 40 is, I want to go in the field of energy and climate literacy, and I don't know how, and who are the people who work here and how did they get their jobs? I'm hearing this. So, and those this couple students are non-traditional students who are making a career change because green jobs movement came up a few years ago, and they noticed people switching careers into these creative spaces, sustainability managers, energy auditors, energy engineers, and so they want to learn more about climate piece so that they can be, they as a sustainability manager, they can have both arms of that job, not just the energy, but also climate.
Yep.
So I'm hearing this, and then I said, well, there is a dialogue going on.
But there are over 250 people showing up in one way or another, and so I think that the emergence of who's showing up is just a sample of who actually is aligned to this purpose. But I think that it's what grade level are the students?
This is a 200 level course, so these are, I have seniors, juniors, and a couple sophomores.
That's exciting. That'd be fun to talk with them.
Yeah, that is. So well, anyway, I have this space, and I am now rethinking to clean up some of the time to invite people to talk about this workforce thing, because it has come up as a question that I don't feel I can ignore. So, and it is been this week because of being asynchronous. I ended up meeting with each one to ask, if everything fails, what's the one thing that you out of this course? And that was the answer.
It's Devarti, we just finished a grant last week in Washington State for iTest, which is geared at this issue as well. and like partly how you named it in terms of just understanding what the scope of potential career options are in that space and who's working in those.
Yeah.
And really thinking carefully about how we position speakers and mentors for youth in ways that really foster positive identities into those spaces. So like not always white men, for instance, you know, like having women and people of color, indigenous peoples into those spaces in ways that really, you know, it's a fine line between the role model issue and actually like people who are doing work that is also representative of a different kind of science or different way of framing problems, or, you know, and so that kind of thing. And we definitely see that need. The problem being that those communities aren't very tightly woven right now into more formal structures of education. They tend to sit side by side and not always conversing on a deep and meaningful way.
No, this is I have this rare chance to make sense of this big dialogue through ACE and whatever I hear, whatever I saw, whatever I'm reading, and then this small group of students, and it's so interesting that they align somewhere, and I see a lot of connection. So, and we've had, and Frank's right, we've had these conversations in Clean Space in so many forms. This is not new information. So I think the time's changing. Time's getting better.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think that we also are in the midst of a time when we're going to experience a further stratification in the education realm brought on by COVID, where the more privileged students are joining pods and finding ways to support their learning because they have the money to do so, and the students without access to tech and tutors and pods and this whole realm are definitely experiencing educational opportunities in other realms, such as being at home and learning what they can from that realm. But I think that if we are really smart about this, we can respond to that gap by providing opportunities in this realm and thinking, how do we reach out to those students who've been left behind to say, well, here's an option that that you can pick up on quickly. So I hope we can figure out how to do that.
You know, Patrick, there's another dimension to what you're saying that's I've been wrestling with is I was interviewed by a high school senior this morning, and she's working with R1 Climate and she's developing an op-ed from a student perspective of what is climate literacy. And so we had a long conversation. And you know, I've been watching this, and one of the things I'm concerned is our students are just not waiting for better education. They're really getting fed up, and as soon as they realize climate change is something that's important to their world, and they self-educate in a variety of ways, then they start getting pissed. And I'm sorry to be blunt, but they're not having it. And so, you know, I asked her about her science program, and she's in New York. Biology, nothing. Chemistry, nothing. Physics, nothing. It came up in social studies as a what did she call it? It was like, you know, like something that's happening in the world, conversation.
Conflict.
And she's like, you know, just like you know, current events. That was what it was, current events. So something was happening, and she got introduced to climate change through social studies current events in New York State. And then she followed a friend of hers to a camp called, at Dartmouth, called Entrepreneurship in the Environment at Sustainable Summers. I'd never heard of this. And it was a transformational experience for her. Everything is about this now. through one camp, but nothing in her formal education gave her any indications that this is important, something to pay attention to, something to prepare for, and something possibly to consider for your life's work. Nothing. It came from outside schools. And so I'm starting to get more excited and interested and focused on, I have a mad respect for teachers, but the system is just not moving fast enough. We moved the standards. We did that. Our network did that. And we did it in the sciences first, and is now starting to go, but even then the system response rate from standards to teachers to experience in classrooms, it's just moving way too slow. And so I'm starting to think that we need to start interacting around classrooms and activating up and around as opposed to just down. You know, I think that our students just aren't served well right now. And everything we're doing with teachers and programs still needs to happen, but we've got to find other interventions. So Tiffany, I know you're on here. You know what I'm talking about because you're living this. This is your work. But we've got to find other interventions to complement and also put some upward pressure from the students because they're not having it. But they're kind of just getting educated elsewhere. And I think that they could demand more of their education systems. So then we're not pushing as much as we're getting pulled in as supports. So, you know, that just is where I am right now.
I would agree because there's so many opportunities to bring together the formal and the informal spaces. Because as someone who's been in the classroom that didn't get the training and didn't have time and kind of self-educated, and now I'm outside the classroom, there's so many people that want to help. And so gathering both those entities together, like right now I'm involved in a lot of pods. And so exactly what you were saying, Patrick, we're trying to close that opportunity gap. So I have families who want to pay extra, and we're going into neighborhoods to pull kids into pods that normally wouldn't be invited into pods, and bringing kids together 6 feet apart at the park. And we're talking about the intersection of systemic racism, COVID, and climate change. And, you know, these are things that outside people can do. So it's that whole reimagining, like you're saying, Frank, about what does education look like? And it's all of us from all the realms coming together, right?
Yep.
And I totally agree, Tiffany. Like what we really need to be doing is maybe the K-12 structure is some kind of like frame that we know that's a portal to which we have conscripted students. They all have to go to school. So we use that as a way to connect community-based education, career and technical education, like into those spaces so that youth hear about these programs and have access to them, or teachers like work collaboratively with these programs. But yeah, so, and I think it's of course a multi-pronged project. There's the 50-year project of radically changing the educational system. And then there's the like 2-year project, which, you know, we're just going into year 3 here in Washington State, which is bringing together community with schools and trying to figure out how to move things faster. So yeah, no, I totally agree.
One area that I think is outside of the educational realm to some degree, but where there is considerable young people being active on the climate issues is in the political realm. Unfortunately, it's only on one side for what I know about, and but there are a lot of young Democrats that are very much involved. They're involved in democratic politics. They're involved in the environmental sort of subgroup here in Wisconsin in the party, and they are quite active. I don't know if anything is going on in the Republican Party. It's possible that there is, but I'm not tapped into that. And I do agree that there is some kind of stratification going on based upon those that have better situations or more income. But to some degree, that has always been the case. The students that did not have as much income, that were struggling to save for college, they were out working and they weren't able to join the clubs, or perhaps their interests were different and they prioritize athletic events or drama or something else. But I think the stratification has always existed.
But Jim, I think the thing that's changing is that while that is true, our patience and tolerance for that stratification, I can speak personally, is definitely vaporizing. And I'm definitely hungry to find other workaround strategies that are responsive and nimble and scalable and actually serve the 1 in 4 people that's a student in this country. That's a massive block. So at least 76 million people in this country are a student. And we're not operating anywhere near the scale that is commensurate to the challenge before us. And I'm done had it.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to share again that, the momentum continues to build here in California for the county offices of education as those regional hubs that are bringing the community-based partners together with the schools. And although we had hoped that it would be with districts as a whole to make sure that climate and environmental literacy was for every student, it's still something that's more reaching down to between community-based partners and individual teachers. But we're having through ongoing professional development in San Mateo County, Santa Cruz County, San Joaquin County, groups of people that are coming back together summer over summer, year after year, to really deepen that connection and to make sure that the expertise that the community-based partners and universities and science and other organizations have is making its way to the schools. So it's not a, so I still have hope again that the unit of change might be these county offices or whatever that looks like in different states, because that seems to be the right size fit for matching these two groups together.
The other thing, Amy, that hopefully will help that is in the STEM teaching tools collection work that we've synthesized from the last couple of years here, we're starting to push it out into the STEM teaching tools collection. So I'm just looking at the final proof of a STEM teaching tool on keeping climate science learning and instruction focused on creating solutions. So there'll be one of those. There's one coming out around action-oriented learning in climate science. And there's one coming out about how to address politics in the related to climate science in the classroom. So those are 3 that were named as really specific needs for teachers as support. So that'll hopefully help. And that's, I think, Frank, why we get to the situation where we don't have the change we need, because teachers are struggling with these issues and don't have the support they need to figure out how to work through those issues.
Yep.
If this helps, and Frank, I think there's very few of us who wouldn't share the emotional feeling you just expressed. I think there's also kind of like us doing a 2-track thing. There is definitely we do it, we do the workarounds, we do the just getting it done out in the community, and we also work as best we can within the system, so to speak, and work with the districts. I mean, we're not abandoning you, Amy. That's that's for sure. But one is, if this helps, if the one of places that me and Natalie are particularly working on in Lowell School is we have a group of students who want to help to get more of this going in terms of being able to communicate well on Zoom, to go to conferences, to be voices of students who will speak with the adults. At the same time, having Zoom calls with students across the country and across the U.S., like climate clubs, like talking peer-to-peer. We're just going to get it done. We're not waiting for the adults. We're going to do things. But also that you can have a meeting, you can have a conference, and the students are right there in that, speaking to them. Kind of both being, I kind of try and encourage respectful and not uncivil, but also impatient. And we're moving if you're not moving. And anyway, that thing of actually having the student, and part of what's really feels good to me as I check it with Natalie, and other teachers at Lowell about how do you feel about, are we going in a place that, is that going against what we're supposed to do, the formal teachers are supposed to do? No, this is like language arts. This is teaching them to communicate. And frankly, and it's us also, even we're using the latest technology and the latest ways to communicate. Voice over on video is something that you wouldn't consider students doing 20 years ago. Zoom calls, things like this. This is the stuff they need to know, and this is good for so there's no, like, this runs against their education by encouraging them to be being, what's the right term, people who are impatient and move things along, that they go and change things. Anyway, please, and of course, Tiffany, of course, anything to connect with what your students are doing. I mean, there has to be the connections in organization and the sense that they're not alone. You know, their group they're not just voices in the wilderness. So, thanks.
We have 5 minutes. Oh, 6 minutes.
You know, after this conversation, there are times that I wonder whether or not we should develop an ACE national strategy. You know,
Why?
well, no, is it really worth it all? Right. I mean, I get encouraged to do stuff all the time. Right. And I'm like, is that worth it? And I'll tell you resoundingly, thoroughly, utterly, completely, we need a strategy.
Yeah.
And because I mean, it's like, how do these things come together? And what I've really appreciated about this work that I got nudged into is, I appreciate that, Deb. I'm looking at you. Is that when you think about not what can I do, but what do we need to do, you flip it, you start coming up with really different answers. And so, Tiffany, I love what you're doing. I mean, I love everybody's work, but I mean, you know, just like the smartness of each of these pieces is really awesome. But then when you start thinking about how do they come together with a purpose, and then you start seeing like who's the Tiffany around Amy, and who's the Tiffany in Washington State, and you know, I'm not one-to-one, but it's like these. Then you start to think about the strategy, and you start being able to think about how do you articulate this in a much different way. And it's just interesting that we in Clean, you know, we started in 2008, and we're just, I mean, we've kicked this around a little bit for a while, but we've never really tried to actually do it. And I think that is exciting for us as a community to finally have the audacity to take on this quest, to build a strategy that unites us, as opposed to just assembling what is, but really looking at what should be, and against what our targets and goals are. It's exciting. I'm super humbled to be part of this process, a little daunted some days, but I'd always want to do things that are worth it. And this one is one of those worth it. I had the same thing with Climate Literacy Guide. I looked at Dan Barstow and said, Dan, do we need to do this? And he goes, absolutely. I'm like, all right, off we go. So here we are, off we go. So thank you all.
Thank you.
And I agree, Frank. Same reasoning. So, thank you.
So much work. But it's getting easier and harder all at the same time. But it's good. It's good. It's good. We'll see what happens.
Would you have easy work? You'd be bored. Most of us would be
I
bored.
don't know. I could use some easy work a little while. Just, you know, I used to remember August used to be like a lull time, August, September, like that you could like recharge and kind of get ready for the push.
I don't know what you're talking about.
It used to be that way, man. That's just everything's just hair on fire all the time.
Yeah, I've started taking a different strategy. I've started taking a strategy of like, you know, a Friday, or, you know, like, you know, no digital contact on weekends, or like different kinds of strategies to just take it down a notch and manage the workload. So,
Agreed.
yeah.
Agreed.
I like your anger though. I mean, that's fine. If the kids' anger is bubbling up and getting us riled up, I mean, that's energy we can use to fuel this movement too, you know?
I'm a teacher at my core, and you know, I want to serve students. That is my mission. And when I hear that, I'm like, all right, I hear you. But the one this morning, she was awesome, and she's like, I had no idea. I'm like, right. That's just wrong that you had no idea. And we're gonna try and take care of that. But man, but she got it from a summer camp. That's cool. By accident.
More camps.
You're right. The answer, that's what I said. It's like, wow, I like that camp. We got to figure out how to have more camps like that, because that's an important summer activity that a lot of families participate in, but that's a different kind of camp than the stuff that my kids went to. So exciting stuff.
On to my next Zoom meeting. Thank you, guys.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Such a great discussion today. I think we're starting to get more into presentations in September. So I think we still have an A strategy thing, and then maybe one more informal, and then we'll get back to more regular scheduling. So.
Yep.
Frank, do we need to figure out it came up last week, but I don't think, for some reason, I don't think you were here. But it would be good to try and pull together a group of folks who are like Wendy and Amy, I think, had wanted to be kept in the loop, and Vardy probably, many of the folks on these calls, Dawn House, Joe Henderson, like folks who are involved in like higher ed or either higher ed geoscience education or professional learning work with teachers to have a conversation about things that they know and want to share in the ACE dialogue space.
Yep.
And so I don't know if that would be how to fit that into that, but it would be nice to do that.
So here's what we've committed to. We've committed to holding monthly ACE dialogues like we've been doing. I thought we'd be done in November. Looks like we got to keep going because there's a whole lot of other dimensions that haven't been touched. And so we do need to start thinking about, we have our last informal education one that we designed coming up this month. Then that we start going into September, October, November, December, January, February, March, if we actually launch the ACE National Strategy in 21, these dialogues become even more important because they become a reservoir of stakeholder engagement and thought. They're rich. And so I think that, what other topics, what other panels need to be convened beyond what we've done so far. I think we need to look at begin thinking about what more and who beyond what we've done so far. And so if that's what you're asking, absolutely.
Yeah.
I haven't had the bandwidth to even think about it.
Yeah, I know you're a little head down right now, but like maybe a September one, if we do one around like professional learning design or professional learning challenges and opportunities, something like that.
I'll give you a couple insights. Extension is an incredibly important capability that we have not really understood. The climate piece. There's a climate extension group out of Montana that's starting to show up.
Like outreach? Is that what you mean by
climate extension.
No. Are you talking about university extension offices?
University and Sea Grant and land grant and space grant.
A lot of those.
I don't know the term extension. Is it continuing education?
A lot of it is usually they're connected with land grant universities. So Washington State may have it more than the University of Washington, Deb. And typically it is outreach, but a lot of it has been based around like more agricultural and that in the past, historically, that's a lot of what it was originally established for, was being able to help translate science to like farmers and stuff like that, ecological sort of
Okay.
science.
But we also have that in the Sea Grant, which is transferring that into coastal communities,
Right.
which is also, but that is an emergent space. That is, we have the international dimension under USAID. They do a ton of this type of work, but it's not been explored yet together.
And I would argue that extension could be kind of lumped with outreach because it's kind of sometimes serves similar purposes. It can be different, but can be similar.
Could be continuing ed too. Yeah.
Well, also, but the thing you got to know about extension is it's a triangle: research, education, and community engagement. True extension actually is a triangle, and so they do all of these all the time.
Okay.
And so it's just a whole nother space that we tend not to focus on in our work, and it's a really important dimension that I want to bring to this because I know that because I'm at NOAA, and the Sea Grant is part of our enterprise, as is NIFA, which is the agency that leads the land grant, the tribal commitment.
USDA NIFA had it has money, so that was the money that I had for my first year of my postdoc here. And that was specifically for STEM-based interventions, so building capacity for education. And they had given it for science literacy, which could be easily translated into climate literacy or any literacy. I have, so this goes back to that point of breaking the silos of formal and informal learning. So this thought has come to my mind a lot. So in my research has been with the formals, and I have collaborated with an extension professor. So this collaboration was necessary to reach out to this space because she works in that extension space. So we did a study with the ag teachers, so secondary ag teachers, teachers who are working as horticulture educators. These are informal spaces where climate is being taught, but again, they just teach whatever they can because that's not an NGSS space where we can say, oh, there's these standards. Okay, so we did a study, and that paper, that data is there, everyone wanting climate-based resources. Now, that was published 2020 spring. We published an extension to see if there was interest, and there was a lot of interest. Then that study asked for, the 4-H educators said, we consider ourselves different from extension, so we have some needs too. So right now, we closed the survey on Wednesday. I have 110 responses from urban and rural 4-H educators, only 4-H. And they are from New Jersey, Indiana, Michigan, and Nebraska. And I've just taken a very cursory look, and it's the same kind of patterns that I see, which is resources, what can I teach that is very robust and does not create more alternative conceptions. I am too overwhelmed. How can I integrate more community-based practices? That's what I see. We just closed it on Wednesday, and we meet on Friday to talk about this. So there is that fresh data and that space. Yes, Chris.
Out there.
Yeah, Stevenson. You know her. You've met her at the Catherine Stevenson and Martha Monroe. I mean, that they have been in that space for years. Yep. And they've been, all their papers have talked about that space. It just needs to be revisited in that community integration.
Yeah, I didn't find Martha Monroe's summary of her summary last year to be very community in terms of like justice and equity oriented kind of.
They don't take that perspective.
No.
But they can.
Yes, they can. They can.
Paper, Devarty, that's what it is right there.
So, but what's interesting about this is, like, the longer I do this, I keep on finding these other communities of practice, like career and technical education, extension education, informal education, interpretive education, community-based education, right? You just keep on finding these other modalities and capabilities, and, you know, but that's the landscaping that has to happen. And then how do we strategically relate and align these capabilities so that the learning is redundant and robust and differentiated, as opposed to, oh, they take care of it, oh, they take care of it, and then there's gaps all over the place.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna go on this forever, but in my house, when my husband is that generation that got the scholarship from DOE for energy literacy, but the degree was given as mechanical engineering. That there was no degree for energy learning, so he's a mechanical engineer with an emphasis on energy analysis and energy whatever he does. And then I have my degree in curriculum and instruction and STEM education, because climate literacy is not a department. Climate education is not a department. I was between ecology and science education, and the verdict was, okay, give her this degree, STEM education. And I was like, cool, very cool. Okay, and nobody talked about our paychecks in these spaces because we came out and we are in the workforce. But when he goes and he trains people for ballast training with all sorts of audits, and he comes back and says they are missing some very basic topics which I think biology should have covered, or chemistry and physics, life sciences. He usually points fingers at life sciences. And then when I am meeting these undergrads, I say, well, okay, this is a thermodynamics concept. Okay, you want me to talk about emitted radiation, but okay. So we see the pieces that are missing that this new workforce will need. They're not gonna be there. We both, when we compare notes between ourselves, we have said a lot. It's like, okay, who teaches this? You or me? You or me? So, and he's in all those spaces that are not a university, technical education, certification, on-job certification. And he blames colleges. Like, what are you preparing?
But Devarti, the holes are all over the place.
Yes.
They're just all over the place. And so, you know, that coherence is a really important piece, because it's our mishmash approach to education is the fact that anybody gets a coherent learning through this labyrinth where the actor, the learner, actually is the one who's choosing the coherence.
Yeah.
The system is generating a coherence that they find themselves in, right? So
yeah.
That's been my experience. I went to 12 colleges and I had to weave my coherence across all of these things, and I had no idea what I was until I looked backwards. But I really think that that's what our students are doing right now.
I know.
They're learning whatever way they can to get whatever they think is important and whatever they can contribute to advancing this. And that's just the way it's been. We can do a whole lot better, but it doesn't. What you just described doesn't surprise me in the slightest. And that student this morning confirmed exactly the same thing. Holes all over the place.
Yep.
So I'm probably supposed to go to the NGSS working group meeting right now 12 minutes ago, but it's always great talking with you guys.
Agreed. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.